Everyone, 10 a.m. and we are learning a sikha together. It's Parshas Chayeh Sara from Chelek Tezvav, and it's Sikha Gimel on Parshas Chayeh Sara, and we are learning the schus of Refuah Shlema for Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak ben Sima Chasya. This is a Rashi sikha. If you want to get yourself a chumash, I always love to have the chumash close, but you don't absolutely need it for this sikha because the Rebbe is mitzatek the whole sikha, all the details. I mean the Rashi. The Rashi is on the words Vayivieha Yitzchak ha'ayala Sara imay begomer. So the context is that after Eliezer, with all the nisim that occurred in finding Rivka, brings Rivka to Yitzchak, then Yitzchak brings Rivka into the tent of his mother. And it's on these words that we have this Rashi, and this is an iconic sikha. And in his commentary on the pasuk, Hetik Rashi Satevas Ha'ayala Sara Imay. Rashi brings down as the Dibur HaMaschil, as the words that he's going to comment on, he brings down the three words Ha'ayala Sara Imay, to the tent which belonged to Sarah, his mother. And as we know, the Rebbe always taught us that the words of the Dibur HaMaschil are not random, and they're not just for the purpose of pointing us to what Rashi wants to comment on, but rather they are part of the commentary themselves. Uperish, and this is what Rashi comments on those three words. Vayiviyah ha'ayala, he brought her into the tent. V'harehi Sara imay, and behold, she is Sarah his mother. Kilemar, that is to say, the nas is dugma Sara imay. She became like in the image of Sarah his mother. How so? Shekol's man Sarah kayemes, for all the duration of Sarah's life, hayaner daluk me'erev Shabbos le'erev Shabbos, a candle remained lit from one erev Shabbos to the next. Ubracha mitzuya be'isa, and there was a blessing in the dough. Va'anan kashor ala ayel, and there was a cloud atop her tent. Umishamesa pasku, and when Sarah passed, these miracles stopped. Ucheshavas Rivka chazru, and when Rivka came into the tent, they returned. The Kasvu Mefarshim and the super commentaries on Rashi wrote, Sherashi diek perizem min hateva ha'ayala, shenemra lefnei Sarah imay. That Rashi brings this commentary, elucidates this commentary specifically from the word ha'ayala, her tent, which is followed by the word Sarah imay. Ilu perish hadvarim haya kafi hanir bepashtos. Shesara imay koi al ha'ayala. If the commentaries tell us that the simple explanation of this pasuk would have been that the words Sara imay are connected to the word ha'ayala, Hainu, this would mean ha'ayel shel Sara imay, the tent of Sarah, his mother, haya hakasov tzarech leimar ayhala Sara imay, ay le'ayhel Sara imay. Okay, the syntax is wrong here. The grammar is wrong, because if the pasuk should be read, he brought her to the tent of Sarah, his mother, then the pasuk should have used the word ayhala, not ha'ayhala, or le'ayhel Sarah imay. Aval ein makom lichtav b'lashayin ha'ayhala v'hei hayadia hamayra sheyadua kvar shel mi ha'ayel zeh. But the way the pasuk is written seems not in consonance with the grammar, because if you write ha'ayhala with the hey hayadia, meaning that everybody knows whose tent this is, then you don't need to follow up with saying Sara imay. V'zehu mikar shel Rashi lefarish haloshen v'yiviyah yitzchak ha'ayala hu siyam ha'inyan. And so the Mefarshim say that is the super commentaries on Rashi explain that this is what Rashi is trying to tell us, that he brought him into the tent. There should be a comma after that. That should be siyum ha'inyan. That's the end of that thought. The Sara imoy hu inyan naisaf. And when the pasuk says Sara imay, Sara is his mother, this is an additional thought. What is it? It's telling us Baharehi Sara imay, that Rivka, it's more than resembles, that she becomes, behold, she becomes his mother Sara. So this is how Rabbi Elazar Mizrahi, the Gur Aryeh, and the Sifsei Chachamim, and other super commentaries on Rashi explain what Rashi is doing here. Aval, but the Rebbe says, however, al pi hezbazeh eina muvan. If this is the explanation for what Rashi is doing here, I have a couple of questions. The Rebbe says, Aleph, mipnei ma hetik Rashi shekol teva beperush miduyekes gam es tebas imoy shebechasuv. If this is what Rashi is trying to do, then why does he include the word imoy in the Dibur HaMaschil? And we know that every word he puts in the Dibur HaMaschil is with precision. If what's driving Rashi's question is that the word ha'ayala is the wrong word, and how do we know that? Because it shouldn't have been followed by the word Sara, because ha'ayala means we all know exactly which tent this is, then it would have been enough to just say ha'ayala Sara. And because the word imay is superfluous, it's not necessary here, he should not have included it in the Dibur HaMaschil. That's question number one. Beis. Lama perish Rashi shahadimian l'sara b'arehi Sara imay hu benisim she'eru shekolzman, etc., etc. Why does Rashi feel compelled to tell us that how did Rivka become Sara? In other words, how is she similar to Sara? That there were all these nisim. He could have simply said that in her actions, she very closely resembled Sara. But no, instead, Rashi brings in elongated fashion all kinds of miracles. Gimel. Even if you want to say that it's absolutely necessary for Rashi to say that a miracle happened, but where in Pshuta Shel Mikra does Rashi have a basis for telling us exactly what nes happened? And how much more so, there doesn't seem to be a foundational text for telling us that there was more than one nes. And how much more so in all the details. And it's true that we find this in the Perush of Targum Yonasan. But his commentary is different than Rashi's, in that Rashi is Pshat. But Targum Yonasan writes Shehevi Rakas, and yet, even though he doesn't have the stated mandate of Rashi to only involve himself in Pshat, Hevi Rakas Aprachel Ner Dolok, he only brings one miracle. Rashi, on the other hand, whose stated mandate is only to address the Pshat, feels compelled to bring three miracles. Why? So those are the three questions. Beis. V'haya efshar leimar. The Rebbe says we might be able to say sheshloishes hapratim shehevi Rashi b'perushay achein eino muchrachim al pi pshuta shel mikra. That it's true that all the details of these three miracles that Rashi includes in his perush, true, they're not substantiated by the pshut shel mikra. Ella shehevi Rashi mi medrash Rabbah drash hakosher lipshat hakasuf. But Rashi brought from the Medrash Rabbah a medrash that is connected to the pshat. Umitam zeh seeing Rashi is hamakor b'siyum perushei bereshis Rabbah. And for this reason, Rashi does something that he doesn't always do, not even half of the time, that he tells us at the end of his perush that it comes from Bereshis Rabbah. And the Rebbe adds another detail here in the brackets, Shachein mikisve hayad perush Rashi nikor shehatzion Bereshis Rabbah kan hu l'shonei shel Rashi. The Rebbe says, and by the way, from the handwritten manuscripts that are extant of Rashi's writings, it's recognizable that his citing Bereshis Rabbah is what he did, V'loi haisafas hamatikim, and it's not something that those who copied his perush added. Like many other Maramikaimes that were added by the Ma'atikim, by those who copied it. Ulam, however, the Rebbe says, in addition to, we don't understand why Rashi is bringing all this medrash, and the fact that he brings us the source from Bereshis Rabbah, dubious. Adayan ain't movan. But on top of that, there's still things that are not understood. Imkain. Let's say we want to accept that. And we're going to say, okay, yeah, it's not al pi pshat, but Rashi sometimes does that. And he's underscoring that it's not al pi pshat by bringing us that it's from Bereshis Rabbah. But the Rebbe says, but if so, Aleph, lama hishmit Rashi as a prat haravi shehuva b'medrash. If so, if Rashi is simply importing a pshat from the medrash, why does he delete? Why does he not include the fourth detail that medrash cites? And what was that? Dalsois psuchos levacha, that the doors of their tent were open wide. That was another miracle that returned when Rivka went into the tent, according to the Bereshis Rabbah. However, Rashi does not cite that. And Beis, Madua mana Rashi shloshis hapratim b'seder shayna v'yaser mizu hafoch misidram b'midrash. And secondly, if all that Rashi is doing here is simply importing a perush in wholesale fashion from the medrash, then why does he change the order? Not only does he change the order of how it appears in the medrash, but he actually presents it to us in the opposite way of how it appears in the medrash. Where it says anan kosher al pesach oil, then it says bracha mitzuya be'isa, and then it says v'ner dolok. And Rashi gives it to us in the opposite order. Hare be'emes milichatchila kosher loimer shekavanas Rashi kan haisarak lahatik midrashas chazal. The Rebbe says, and the truth is, from the very beginning, you're hard pressed to say that all that Rashi is doing here is copying from the medrash. Kvar nizbar ba'avar. Ba'arichus, ha'amim rabbis. The Rebbe says, it was already explained, but really he's saying, I've already explained many times at great length. Hatam she'ein Rashi maskir b'derech klal es mokar hapirushim sheyesh lehem yisoid b'midrashei chazal. Why Rashi doesn't, in the aggregate, mostly, on a regular basis, include the citation when he brings us a medrash from Chazal. Lefi shegam perushim elu miyusadim v'nolmedim mitoich pshuto shel mikra. And this is because if Rashi brings down a medrash, then he is teaching us that these commentaries, these perushim, are based on and are learned from the pshuto shel mikra. Ve'im kain, and if so, makar haperushim hu pshat hakosov. Rashi is trying to teach us that the real source of these midrashim are from the actual pasuk. And when there is an instance where what Rashi is taking from Chazal, from Midrashi Chazal, is not al pi pshutai at all. V'Rashi meviyoi rak mishum shapshat hapashuv eino bohir kol kach o kedayme. And Rashi brings it in his perush only because the pshat is not clear. Azai Rashi achin meir al kach umakdim Rabbeinu darshu kiyetze. In that case, when Rashi brings down a medrash, and he is saying to us that it's not jumping out from the pasuk itself, then Rashi will preface by saying, our sages taught us, Rabbeinu darshu, ve'im kain. And so once we understand what Rashi's regular style is, either he doesn't bring a makar, and what he's teaching us is that the makar is actually the pshuta shel mikra. It's right there. It can jump out at you from the text. You can tease it out from the text. Or in cases where that's not the case, he will say something like Rabbeinu darshu. In Cain, if so, be'inyanenu eina muva. Then in our Rashi that we are looking at now, it's not understood. Mimanavshech. Either way. Im kol shleishes hadvarim muchrachim shel mikra lo yahaya Rashi tzarich lahasif as a tiyum bereshis rabbah. If these three miracles jump out at you, or at least can be teased out of the text, then Rashi wouldn't have to say that the source is the bereshis rabbah. And if they're not based, if you can't say that you have to come to this conclusion from the pasuk, Virashi Hebis is rak betur medrash, and Rashi brings it simply as a medrash, hanegel pshut mikra, that is relevant to the pshat of the pasuk. He should have prefaced, as is his normal style, and he should have underscored that Rabbeinu darshu, that our sages taught, Shakol's Mancha Sara Kayemes, and all that for the duration of Sarah's life, and so on and so forth. But in this Rashi, we have something anomalous. It doesn't seem that Rashi is saying this jumps out at you from the pasuk, on the one hand. And on the other hand, he doesn't preface by saying our sages taught. And yet, he does bring a citation. He does bring the original place from which this appears. But he's not just cutting and pasting. He deletes one of the details of the medrash, and he changes the order completely. Gimel, v'habir bazeh. And the explanation is, HaKoshi sheba Rashi liyashiv hu b'chol shalosh hateva shehetik ha'ayala Sara imay. So one of the questions the Rebbe asked is, why is the word imay in the Dibra HaMaschil? And the Rebbe says, because Rashi's question is based, he's seeking to reconcile all three words. Shelech Eira, it would seem, Hein miutaris kulan. It would seem that all three are superfluous. Why? Kavanas hakasuf kan, he l'saper shekasher higia Rivka Eliezer v'tekev siper Eliezer liyitzchak ba'amdei adayim b'chutz as kol hakares itay azay hichnis Yitzchak as Rivka pnima v'lakcha leisha. It seems that the intention of the pasuk here is to tell us that when Rivka arrived with Eliezer, and immediately Eliezer relayed to Yitzchak, while they were still standing outside, all of the things, all of the events that happened. And as soon as he related this, Yitzchak brought Rivka inside the tent. Azai hichnis Yitzchak as Rivka pnima, he brought her inside. V'lakalish, and he took her as a wife. V'im came, and if this is what the pasuk is trying to tell us, then the pasuk should not have used the words ha'ayala Sara imay. It should have just said vayivi'ah Yitzchak vayikachas Rivka vatila leisha. Skip all the three words ha'ayala Sara imay. Uma moisif al kachanemar ha'ayala Sara imay. In other words, the Rebbe is saying, if you look at the narrative from a literary point of view, these words, all three words are superfluous, because the pasuk is trying to map out the trajectory of events. Rivka arrives with Eliezer. Eliezer tells Yitzchak of all the miraculous events. They're standing outside, they're chatting outside. And as soon as Yitzchak hears this, he brings Rivka in and he takes her as his wife. Umizeh, move on from the fact that the pasuk includes these three words, Sha'ayla Sara imai, these three words, it proves, it understood that these words, Ha'ayla Sara imai, ba lahisif davar ma hanageh l'siyum hamaisa. These words come to add something to the end of the story. And the end is, Vayikach es Rivka batila leisha. Ki bekach haidi anu hakosov es hatam v'hasiba shehevioi es Yitzchak lekachas es Rivka. Because these three words actually relate to us the reason for why Yitzchak took her as a wife. And what these three words are teaching us is that before he took her into the tent, this was not something that he was completely decided on. In other words, irrespective of the fact that Eliezer relayed to him all the miracles that had occurred, he was still not convinced 100% that this is his wife. The litmus test is taking her into the tent. And that is why these words are included. Kiloimar, this is to say, although Eliezer had told Yitzchak the miraculous and wondrous chain of events, b'diuk al pi hasimanim shekava, and he told it to him with all the details, and included, the simanim and golalei nisim shenasulei shekaftalei haaretz v'shenazdamnalei Rivka b'tfilasei, and he included the miracles of Fitzas Haderech, that it took him a very, very short time to get where he was supposed to go. It was miraculous, and that Rivka appeared immediately after he prayed to Hashem. And Eliezer shared with Yitzchak that he saw in this a proof that this is the woman that Hashem said would be for your servant, for Yitzchak. Hainu, Sherifka matima b'maleisel liyos eshes Yitzchak, meaning that Rivka is a fitting wife because of all of her characteristics to be the wife of Yitzchak. Mikol makaim, but still in all, adayin lehaya Yitzchak batuach legamrei she achein doimeh lemishpachtei. And still, Yitzchak had his doubts. He was not completely sure that she, in fact, is the right woman, that she is doimeh, that she, I'm losing the word, help me. Rachi, you're usually the one. But
similar,
thank you, similar to his family, Li'imai Sara, and specifically to his mother Sara, Bitzitkus, in her piety, in her being a tzaddikas v'chule. Vare l'shem kach shalach Avram es Eliezer arti b'maladati, and he knew that it was precisely for this reason that Avram had sent Eliezer to his homeland and to the place where he was born, because it had to be somebody who was similar and belongs in the family. But he wasn't convinced until he brought her into the tent of his mother Sara. But once we understand from what the pasuk is telling us that Yitzchak's decision hinged on what he saw in the tent, the hechrach loimar, then we're forced to say, Sheba Isa Shara Nisim Neflois Gidoilim Yoser Mikaid Mehem Shagilu Ubitu as Hayesa Daima Ba'ofen Mushlam Lemishpachas Avram Velasara Befrat. We must say, the Rebbe says, that in that moment when he took her into the tent, he saw Nisim and Niflois, miracles and wonders, that were much greater, that eclipsed the wonders and the miracles that Eliezer had told him about. And they revealed and they expressed that, in fact, she was similar to his family in a complete way, and specifically to Sara, his mother. Umifarish Rashi, and so Rashi explains to us, Shedavar zeh achin merumaz belashoin ha'ayela Sara imai. And now Rashi tells us that, in fact, these nisim that he maps out in his Perush are, in fact, alluded to in the words of the pasuk ha'ayela Sara imai. Shera neis bekesher le ha'ayela, neis biyachas le Sara, the neis b'shaychas le imai. That he beheld miracles that correlate to the words ha'ayela, Sara, and imai. 3 miracles for 3 words, which would seem to be superfluous unless you understand them the way the Rebbe tells us Rashi wants us to understand them, which is that you need these words because they indicate to you that it was only because of taking her into the tent that he, in fact, decided to marry her. And before you learned the Sikha, I don't know that most people would come to that conclusion. I think most people would think it was a done deal. There were so many miracles, and Eliezer brings her. And we know from Rivka's side that she believes it's a done deal. She veils herself, and so on and so forth. So it seems like it's done. But the Rebbe's chiddush here is that no, that these words, which would otherwise not be necessary, tell us that it was what happened in the tent that made Yitzchak know this was the right woman. And only then did he marry her. And that specifically these 3 words allude to what he saw in the tent. Ubifratius al pi haseder. And in detail, according to the order of how the nisim are presented to us and how the words are in the pasuk. Ha'ayala. I'm sorry, not according to the way the nisim are presented, but according to the words. Ha'ayala, behei hayadiyah. So the word ha'ayala, like we already said, it could have said ayel Sara imai, but it says ha'ayala, the tent, with the hey hayadiyah, which means that everybody that reads this word knows exactly which tent you're talking about. And this alludes to the miracle of the cloud. So this miracle is connected, Neis HaKashur La'ohel. It's connected to the word tent. Kiloimar, this is to say, Neis HaMabdil Es HaOyel Mikol Shar HaOyelim. This is a miracle that delineates and separates this tent from all other tents. Shalachein Nikra HaOyela Behayadiyah. That's why it's called Ha'ayela, because this was the only tent that had a cloud hovering above it. Dahainu. Ha'ayel hayadua v'hamaforsam, meaning this is a tent that is known and is famous. V'hadavar moivil lahavana shahakavana hi la'anun kasher al ha'ayel. And once we understand that this is a famous tent, this is a known tent, so this brings us to the understanding that this is correlated with the miracle of the cloud that was connected and hovered above the tent, Shechain. And the Rebbe says it's pashut to the Ben Chamish Lamikra. Kfar lamanu ke'ein ze b'pasuk vayar es hamakoim merachik. We just learned in the previous parsha, Parshas Vayera, about the Akedas Yitzchak, and we have the pasuk, and he saw the place hamakoim merachik. That place was separated from all other places in terms of its holiness. And therefore was worthy of being called the place. And how did Rashi tells us that how did Avram know this was the place? This was Anan Kashor Alahar. Because Avram Avinu was able to see that there was a cloud that hovered on the mountain, the Imkain. And so if Rashi just explained this to us in the previous parsha, if so, move on. So it's clear. It's pasha that in this instance, when the Torah tells us ha'ayala, again with the heyadiyah, the tent that is known, it's coming to teach us about a similar nest, a nest like this, anan kasher ala ayel. And through the agency of this miracle, you can tell that this tent is different from the rest. What about the word Sara? In which way is there a miracle alluded to in the word Sara? So regarding Sara, this has to be nes b'davar sheyesh l'shayches miyuchedes l'Sara. This has to be a miracle that has something specific to do with Sara. And again, what did we just learn? Hamuvan mitoich mashalamanu kvar le'il b'parshas Vayera. And this too is something that we just learned in last week's parsha. And that is, kasher bo hamalachim k'orchim lavram. When the malachim came, disguised as guests to Avram, his asik ba'atzmai ba'achanas ba'hagashas ha'macholim avuram. He himself was busy with preparing and serving them the meal, the various courses of the meal. Ulam misupar b'kasuv shedavar echad hayayetim haklal. But the pasuk tells us it was one thing that was different. And it tells us, Vayimaher Avram ha'ayla el Sara, Avram hurried to Sarah's tent, Vayomer Mahari, and he said to her, quickly, hurry, soiles lushi ba'asi ukais, quickly knead up a dough and make cakes or bread. Zois Ameres, this means, Shemebli ha'beit al goydel ha'shadlus shel Avram Avinu l'kaimis mitzvah chanasas orchim, that irrespective of the fact that it's clear that Avram Avinu put great effort into observing the mitzvah chanasas archim. Ad sherotz ba'atzmai lamrois hatzar hagadol shasava ba'is hayam lahavi lefneim ben bakar. And we know that he had so much mesiras nefesh because despite the fact that this was the third day from his bris milah, and so he was in great pain, which was why Hashem had initially not wanted him to have to worry about guests, right? And notwithstanding his great pain, he himself ran to find a young calf. But still in all, but when it came to kneading and preparing the dough, this he left completely in Sarah's hands, and from this we learned that this was something that was Chayeh to her. This was maybe her specialty, sourdough, even before COVID, who knows? But this was her thing, okay? So Avram did not engage himself in this, and therefore, so because the pasuk is alluding to nisim that happened, and specifically with Sarah, move on. So that's where the mind of the Ben Chamesh Mikra is going to go right away to the dough. Bracha mitzuya beisa. Imai. What about the word imai? Af ben Chamesh lemikra yodea umafchin. Al af shadayin lo limetzes. So this one, the Ben Chamesh Mikra can recognize and know this, and he can discern this, although like the other two that are, this one different from the other two is what I meant to say. This one is not hinted at. This is not something that he just learned in a previous parsha. But even the 5-year-old knows shad lakas haner be'erev Shabbos he inyan yotzei min haklal hashayach lenashim bechlal ubefrat leimai. Even a 5-year-old, immediately that's where the association is going to go. It's going to go to his mother. Even though a man could also light candles. Al pi halacha, and if there's no woman, a man should and must. But still, this is an inyan yotzei min haklal. This is an unusual thing that is always associated with the mother, Balkain, and therefore, kasher ben chamesh lemikra leimed al davar neis hakasher leimai. When the ben chamesh lemikra kind of is triggered when it comes to thinking about which nisim actually convince Yitzchak, and he sees the word imai, immediately mavin gamhuas hashaychus alakas ner Shabbos. Even the 5-year-old can connect the dots here. Sharehu royes imay mekayem ezois b'chol erev Shabbos, because he sees his mother do this all the time. And the Rebbe says, and although it's true that this mitzvah is not only for his mother, meaning for mothers, but even for young women, even before they get married, the Rebbe says, like I'm going to explain further on. But still, the association is not constant like it is with his mother. It's not in every place, and it's not at all times that the Ben Chamesh will see young unmarried women light candles. Why? Because this could be Ben Chamesh Mikra that doesn't have sisters, poor kid, or that his sister is very young, so she didn't start lighting candles. So the association is not going to be immediate with girls. The Alpizem move on. And so, based on what the Rebbe has mapped out for us, and based on all of this, it's understood. Hatam shalahevi Rashi as ha'inin haravi sheboy ha'isa Rivka daimel Sara. Why Rashi did not incorporate in wholesale fashion everything that the Medrash says, including the 4th miracle in which Rivka resembled Sara. Because simply speaking, in the pasuk, you don't find an allusion, you don't find a hint to more than these 3 things. Okay? Seems very smooth and elegant and neat. Ela shadayin yesh lishal. But the Rebbe says, but we still have to ask. Minayin muchach shahaneras dolku zman kairav. From where do we have proof that the candles remained lit for such a long time? Erev Shabbos, Erev Shabbos. Vari afilu ne'amar shadolku b'meshach me'es la'esh sholei mikuyetze b'zeh yesh kan gam kein neis gadol. Even if you were to say that they remained lit for 24 hours, that would already be a big miracle. So what compels Rashi, again, pshutei shel mikra, to say they remained lit from Erev Shabbos to Erev Shabbos? Ulekushya zu hityaches Rashi b'kach shahisi bereishis rabba. And it's for this very reason, for this wrinkle, as it were, for this question, that Rashi brings down the words bereishis rabba. Kiloimar, that is to say, b'derech hapshat achin yesh safek kamas mandol kohaneres. If you're going to go according to the pshat, yeah, you don't have a proof for how long these candles remained lit from the pshat. Aval kach isa bereishis rabba shaneres dolkum erev Shabbos. But this is what the Medrash teaches. Hey, ulam, however, Lefizeh kasha beyeser says seder hadvarim beperish Rashi. But now, in accordance with everything we have learned above, we have even a bigger question about the order in which Rashi brings us the 3 nisim. Ner dolok me'erev Shabbos, ubracha mitzuya be'isa, va'anan kasher alayah. Not only is this opposite the order in which they are presented in the Medrash, it's also opposite of the words in the pasuk that we just finished explaining serve as proof because they allude to these miracles. Kemotion is bar le'il, just as the Rebbe says, I just explained above. Ha'ayala is connected to the anan kasher al ayel. The word Sara is connected to bracha mitzuya be'isa, the blessing of the dough. And imoy is connected to ner dolok, me'erev Shabbos la'erev Shabbos. So why would Rashi not only invert the order of the Medrash, but also bring it to us in an order that doesn't correlate with the words in the psukim that seem to hold within them the hint for these miracles? And the Rebbe says in brackets, "Ve'ein l'tarich haseder perish Rashi hu behetem l'seder shaboy iru shloishes hadvarim etzel Rivka." And you cannot say that the way that Rashi presents them is in consonance with the order in which they occurred to Rivka. Ki afilu im nefarish should be also hisa be'erev Shabbos lifnei chashecha, because even if you want to say that she arrived on Friday before dark, and so the first thing she did was light candles. But it still stands to reason that this miracle would have taken place after she saw how the cloud is hovering over the tent. The imkain, and if so, Rashi liftayach. It would seem that this would have been the first miracle that would have been beheld by Yitzchak. That as she approaches the tent, the Anan comes back. And so Rashi should have presented it that way. First, Anan kasher ala oil, hanes harishon she'ira mishenichnisa Rivka la'oil, when she went into the tent. Then he should have given us the miracle that is discernible as soon as she begins to start making the dough. This miracle that the candles remained lit from one Erev Shabbos to the other Erev Shabbos, l'chayra, would only be seen 1 week later. So you can't hypothesize that Rashi is giving us these miracles in the order that they occurred. And they're also not in the order of the Medrash, and they're also not in the order of the words that they are based on in the Pasuk. And the Rebbe is going to present more than one explanation for Rashi's order. Once we understand that bringing Rivka into the tent that belonged to Sara, his mother, was actually what led to Yitzchak taking Rivka as his wife, because it was only through bringing her into the tent that it became clear to him that Rivka was like his mother Sara. Muvan shalacholerish ubeikar negas kan hahashva bifrat shel hatzidkos. Then we have to understand that first and foremost, and mainly, what's important here and what he's trying to decide and discern is how she is similar and how she can be compared to his mother in terms of her righteousness. I saw something jump into the chat. One second. So Khani's asking a very good question. What was the miracle of the dough that would be seen immediately? I thought it was that it stayed fresh. So I think, I thought of the same thing when I was reading it. I think that it could be more than one thing that this bracha included, and that perhaps that it just was a very good dough. Like that there was I don't know, those of us who make dough, you know how sometimes it's really good and sometimes it's like, why is it so lumpy and it seems dry or it seems too wet? And sometimes you're like, oh wow, this really worked. This is a good dough. I don't know, but that's what I'm thinking. Why couldn't ha'ayla not refer to hachnasas orchim? I'm not sure I understand. I think what the Rebbe is trying to do is say that these three nisim that the Medrash brings down are hinted at in the pasuk. Oh, why couldn't Ayala also hint at the fourth interpretation in the Medrash? It's a great question, Mashi. It seems that the Rebbe is saying that each word correlates to one nace. But I don't know that.
Maybe they weren't the only people having guests, and Ha'ayla indicates that it was so unique in that tent.
That's a good answer. It's a hey hayediyah. It has to be a tent that looks different from everybody else's. Although my pushback to that would be that it was very different, that their tent was open on all four sides. So it wasn't just a like pedestrian tent and they're having guests. So Rachi, why would there be an anon if she didn't go in yet? So I think that's based on a mistake I made. I think I inadvertently said that. And then when you read the Sikha, it seems that as soon as she went in is when the anon should have been discernible and not before. So thank you for everybody for those questions, which are excellent.
I don't think that other people had achnasas archim. Otherwise, that was one of the things that Avram told the guests, if you wouldn't eat by me, where would you eat? If everyone was having guests, then they would have eaten by somebody else. So it was unusual.
I think the level and like the amount of guests and the access to food that he made available to everybody was very, very unusual, like you're saying. I don't know if that means that nobody else had guests, but I think it's about the four doors. I think it's about, like you're saying, like, yes, because we spoke about this last week. Like Avram Avinu would say, yeah, I'm charging you an exorbitant sum, but too bad. You're basically my hostage because where else are you going to get food in this desert? And so Elisheva, at least that's the name on your box. I think you're right that nobody was having achnasas archim on his level. But Mashi's questions, I mean, could still be, there could be other people that have achnasas archim, but none on his level, none with the four doors open and so on and so forth. So now going back to, where were we? Okay, so the Rebbe is saying that Rashi is presenting these miracles to us in a particular order. And the order is relevant to what Yitzchak really wanted to know more than anything else. And that is, how does Rivka measure up to his mother in terms of her tzidkus? And that's why first he brings this miracle about the candles remaining lit from one Shabbos to the other. Dahainu, meaning Nei Shanasa b'mitzvah shekima sheboy misbatas umizgala hamayla sheba hatzitkus shela became hamitzvah. So first, Rashi brings us as Exhibit A miracle that is connected to a mitzvah that she observed. Through this mitzvah that she observed is revealed and expressed her qualities, her specific righteousness in the observance of the mitzvah. And after this, then comes the miracle of the blessing that was found in the dough. This too is connected to her overtures and what she does, but it's not specifically to a mitzvah. It's not a mitzvah to make dough. And only afterwards, and then Rashi lists a miracle that has nothing to do with her overtures. It's both not a mitzvah and it's not even connected to something that she did. So that's how the Rebbe answers this question, but he's going to go back and answer it again in another way. I understood that the dough is always fresh, but an abundance of dough as well. Okay, so it could be the abundance, Chani, Dina Groner is saying. Not just that it stayed fresh, but there was an abundance. Thank you, Dina. Vav. So I think that there are people on who might remember when the Rebbe said the Sikha. I remember there was like a tremendous excitement surrounding this. So the Rebbe says, from the wondrous things that are found in this Parish Rashi, Al Pi HaMevor based on what we explained, that Yitzchak married her only after he saw that her candles remained lit from one Shabbos to another. From this, we learned that Rivka lit candles before she was married. And more than this, Ladas Rashi, and when she got married, she was 3 years old. At an age where a woman is not mechuyev mitzvahs. As mitzvahs hadlakas haneres. She already was keeping this mitzvah. The yisera mizu. And more than this, hadavar shimesh ki inyan v'simon ikri bebirur ki harehi Sara imai. And based on what the Rebbe did in the previous ice, that Rashi presents these nisim, in particular this order, in the order of importance in terms of the litmus test. This means that the fact that she lit candles served as a main clarifying factor, ki harehi Sara imai, that she is like Sarah, his mother. Ubahachlata, and towards his decision, vayikach lo leisha, that he should take her as a wife. Ubifrat shebemikra dinan ein zeis shalule hadlakas haner al yada lo yahya doilek ner Shabbos b'vayezeh. And especially in this instance, if she wouldn't have lit candles, there would be no candles lit in this house. Sharei kiyim Avram Avinu. I'm sorry. And specifically in this instance, in this example, it's not that if she wouldn't have lit candles, there wouldn't have been candles lit. No, because Avram Avinu kept the whole Torah, did all the mitzvahs. Mitzvahs d'Rabbanan can move a gam perish Rashi, inclusive of mitzvahs d'Rabbanan, like Rashi has explained will explain in Parshas Toilets. V'hadinhu, and the halacha is she'im ein ha'isha madlik ner be'erev Shabbos me'izatam she'iyah madlik habal. The halacha is that if a woman can't light candles for whatever reason, the husband lights the candles. V'im kain sarach loymar. Therefore, we must say sheme'az niftara Sara, that from when Sarah passed, Hidlik Avram v'Yitzchak ner b'chol erev Shabbos, that both Avram and Yitzchak, presumably they had separate tents, and they both lit candles. V'afal pikein, and so notwithstanding the fact that there were already candles lit by Avram, lo histapka Rivka b'hadlokas haner shel Avram Avinu. Rivka did not satisfy herself with the candles that Avram Avinu lit. Chayeh gadol mechuyev b'mitzvahs hashayachas az. He was a gadol, he was mechuyev in the mitzvahs, v'hidlika ner ba'atzma, but she herself lit her own candles, av shahisa az ketana b'shalei shanim, even though she was a little girl of 3. Umikan lamadnu hayra brura, and from here we learn a very clear lesson. Ubehetem lemedubar kfar pam and rabbis, and in consonance with what was spoken of many times. Shaloi rak b'nois mitzvah koidem nisu'ein tzriches lahadlik ner Shabbos. It's not just girls who have already passed bas mitzvah but are before marriage that need to light candles. El ela av ketanis, but even little girls. Hechel mibnoi shloi shanim shadayan enim mechuyavos b'mitzvahs, starting from 3 years old, and they're not yet mechuyev b'mitzvahs. Im hein shayaches kvar lahavin hamashmos shebhadlakas ner Shabbos, if they are shayach to understand what candle lighting means, yesh lechanchan lemitzvahs hadlakas ner Shabbos kodesh. They should be educated in the direction of lighting Shabbos candles. Gam kasher bevayizeh madlika kfar ha'em oyacherim ner beturas mitzvah va'isa hamichuyeves b'davar al pi din. Even if there is already a mother and even others that are lighting candles because they're mitzvah va'isa, they have the specific commandment and they do the commandment, and they are mechuyev al pi din. And even though candles are being lit by people who are mechuyev al pi din, the little girl should light as well. Va'aval pisha Rivka haisa az beyoser bashloishanim bas das har beyoser miyalda stam begilza. And it's true, the Rebbe says, that Rivka must have been then a bas das. She must have been very mature and cognitively developed, much more than a regular girl at 3. It's very clear from the whole trajectory of events between her and Eliezer. He really looked at what she was doing. And because she was already mature and cognitively developed, that's why it was necessary, like Rashi points out to us, that she should agree to the shidduch. Rashi says, from here we learn that a woman must agree to her shidduch. Mikal lamanu she'ein mesianas isha ella midaita. We learn that you don't marry a woman, even an older woman, only when she agrees. At the end of this day, she was only 3. Zman rav koidem gil bas mitzvah. It's a long way from bas mitzvah. Hayadina kiktana. So even though she was so mature and so developed, but technically the din al pitera was that she was a ketana. She was a little girl, and still she lit the candles. Zayin. And yet another wondrous thing that we find here. Ka'amor, as has been said, surely Avram Avinu lit candles every Erev Shabbos. Although the pasuk tells us that he was Baba Yamin and that he was older, and Hashem had blessed him with everything, and for sure this means not only that he had everything he needed physically, but that he was consummate in a spiritual fashion. And still in all, Hine b'hadlakasoi, v'chein b'hadlakas Yitzchak, loy niskayim ha'inyan ha'niflo shel ner dolag m'erev Shabbos l'erev Shabbos. Why was this such a telling litmus test for Yitzchak? Because it was not something that occurred when Avram lit the candles. It was not something that occurred when he lit the candles. It was only kafisha niskayim b'hadlakas ha'ner shel Sara. It was only Sarah's candle that remained lit from erev Shabbos to erev Shabbos. Ulachareh b'Rivka. And afterwards, this returned again with Rivka. When she started lighting candles, she was only 3. And the Rebbe says, from this we see as hakoyach hamufla hatamun b'mitzvahs halakas neres, the wondrous power that lies hidden in the mitzvah of hadlakas neres. Va'afilu k'shenasis al yidei yilados Yisrael haktanas b'yoser. Even when it's on the part of little girls, banoi shloishanim, girls that are only 3 years old. Asher kol bas Yisrael nikreis bas Sara Rivka Rachel v'Leah. Every Jewish woman is called the daughter of Sara Rivka Rachel v'Leah. Al yedei hadlakas haner shelah, and through her lighting candles, naaseh kol habayis mur b'meshech hashavua kulei ad la'erev Shabbos haba. She radiates her home. Her whole home is illuminated for the entirety of the week. And the Rebbe says, I'm not just saying that the difference is that physically those candles remained lit. It's true that the physical nace was that it remained lit from Erev Shabbos to Erev Shabbos. Aval b'pnimius hinyonim kainhu b'chol mi shemadlika neres. But on the innermost level, this is true for every Jewish woman who lights candles and every Jewish girl. Aval pisha be'ene basar ein hadavar nira, even though we don't see it tangibly. Ki me'achar shemaisa avos hu siman unesinas kayich lebanim. But because we have this axiomatic rule that everything that the Avos did is both a sign and also gives us kayach. Hare kol misha hi bas Sara v'Rivka v'chulei. So every Jewish woman that is the daughter of Sara, Rivka, Rachel, Leah Yesh biyada hakoyach she'or hamitzvah shel ner hashabbos shelo yifal al meshech hashavua kulei. Every Jewish woman has this koyach that the light and the energy and the her particular spiritual glow should irradiate her home the whole week. V'oid inin nifla. And there's another wondrous thing. Dafka b'hadlakas neres aidei ktanos. Specifically when we talk about little girls lighting candles. Hasher Chazal mafliim begoidel inin hevel pm shalom de hatera. When Chazal tell us how wondrous it is when little children learn Torah, she'olav miskayim ha'olam, that the world exists in this chos, harei madgishim alatar shehamidubar hu the hevel she'ein b'chet. They underscore what is so great about little children learning Torah, that these are children who are innocent of any sin. Hevel tinoika shel beis rabban dafka. It's specifically the breath of these tinoika shel beis rabban, these little children. And so from this we can understand how great is the characteristic of the candle lighting that is done through the agency of a little girl that has no chet. And I want to comment, the Rebbe says, I want to just bring attention. So based on what I said, we have to understand, we have to study. So this should be true of every single mitzvah that a little boy and a little girl does because of chinuch. And we don't find in Sfarim an explanation for why it only says it about limud haTorah. Another comment in the chat: isn't the cloud connected to the mitzvah of Taras HaMishpacha? Yes, it is. Thank you for bringing that in.
I think that question, I had the same question, because I think that question was connected to when the Rebbe says that the candles were connected to Sara because in a close way, because it was the only mitzvah that she did. So really, if the cloud...
Yeah, continue, but I'll just say the Rebbe is going to address this point. This question is a perfect segue into what the Rebbe is going to say in terms of the order. Tess. Hatam shadafka nerasein shel Sara v'Rivka, v'kach gam neres kol b'nasein kol neshei b'nos Yisrael b'chol adaris dolku me'erev Shabbos l'erev Shabbos, ma she'ekin haneres shel Avram. So why was it that it was dafka the candles of Sara and the candles of Rivka? And the Rebbe says, and it's true of all the candles, not tangibly, not physically, but it's true of the spiritual glow in all the generations. Ma she'ekin haneres shel Avram b'nei Yisrael b'chlal. But why not of Avram Avinu and Yitzchak and all men? Yuvan al pi Maimach Razal b'chiluk shebein ish leisha is understood through what our sages tell us is the difference between men and women. Chani, I'm so sorry. I feel like I cut you off. You were in the middle of a sentence. Forgive me, please. I'm sorry. Shenyane shala ish hu shemevi chitin. That Chazal tell us when they want to explain the difference between the male modality and the female modality, the man brings the wheat. He brings it into the house. And it is the work of the woman, his helper that is opposite of him. So he brings home the wheat, she turns it into something that is worthy of food. Koloimar, HaKadosh Baruch Hu kava es teva olam ba'ofen she'ish darkei lichbosh. Hashem created the world in such a way that it is the male modality to conquer. Lirchosh lo dvarim min ha'olam shebichutz ulachnisam el beisoi shaloi. To import, to conquer, conquest, to acquire things from the world outside of his home and bring them into his house, bring them under his dominion. This is the male modality. Masha inkein ha'isha, in contradiction, the woman, and even more adraba. Kivan shekol kvuda bas melech prima, because the glory of the woman is on the innermost plane, in the innermost realm. Hare tafkida ka'keres habayis hu pnima b'toich habayis. Her job, her mandate as the anchor of the home, as the definitive influence in the home, is specifically inside. She actually needs to rectify and even change things that are coming in from the outside, and make them fit for people. So Rebbe is saying it's not like it's a metaphor. Until they are fit and refined enough for the celestial man, for Hashem. And therefore, when Avram Avinu lit the candles, because it's not in the main his mandate, it's not a man's mandate to be invested in this realm. So there was no reason to effectuate a miracle that the irradiation of the house physically should be more than what is normal, because this is not his neighborhood, as it were. The dafka Sara v'Rivka, ulacharein kol b'nai Sara v'Rivka. But it's dafka Sara and Rivka, and after them, all of their daughters until the end of the time. Kol b'nai Yisrael, shenasan lahen HaKadosh Baruch Hu es hatafkid v'hashlichus la'asek b'tarchei habayis. We were vested with this mandate and this shlichus, v'lifel gam binyanim hagashmiyim shebabayis, and to also affect the physical, material aspects of the house. Hare biyadan hashlichus v'hakayach lahashpia ulaha'ir b'nei rasein es kol habayis b'meshach kol hazman. So therefore, because it is a woman's mandate, she gets special kayches, and when she lights the candles, it should be able to illuminate the house, the whole house, all the time. Kach sheb'meshach kol yemais hashavua nire begolui shezehu bayis sheboy hidlika basara v'Rivka ner Shabbos. So whenever somebody walks into the house, it is clear and manifest that this is a house in which a bas Sara, Rivka, v'Rachel lit candles. And now in the last ice, Erit, the Rebbe is going to circle back and relate to your question regarding the cloud connected to Haras Mashpacha and Chani's comment about the dough and kashrus, even though it was not mentioned yet. Al pi hana, based on all of the above, yuvan gam tam haseda shel shloishes hadvarim b'perush Rashi. The Rebbe is now giving us another layer in the reasoning for why Rashi presented the miracles in precisely this order, which again is opposite the order of the Medrash, but even more jarring is opposite the order of the words as they appear in the pasuk that Rashi seems to be saying are alluding to these very nisim. The Rebbe says, "Hameforshim kasfu," and you can look at the footnote, the Cheskuni, the Gur Aryeh, the Ben Ezra, the Be'er Mayim Chaim va'oid. So many mefarshim have converged on this idea. Sheshloishes henyanim shehevi Rashi ner doluk me'er Shabbos bracha mitzuya be'isa va'anan kasher ala ayel. That these three miracles came keneged shloish hamitzvah shenestabu behen b'miyuchad b'nai Yisrael. That they parallel the three mitzvahs that have a special connection to women: chala, nida, taras hamishpacha, v'hadlakas haner. Al yedei shmiras mitzvahs hadlakas haner, ner doluk me'erev Shabbos to erev Shabbos. Hazehirus b'mitzvahs chala pu'ula pa'eles shatia bracha mitzuya be'isa. Al yedei hazehirus b'mitzvahs nida zoicha habayis la'anan kasher al oyel. The Rebbe says that through being careful and observing the mitzvah of Lakas Neris and being careful with the mitzvah of Chala, in which case this brings a bracha into the dough, And through being careful with the mitzvah of Nida, this brings that Hashem's presence should hover over our tent. It brings the Anan, the Shechina. Ubehetem l'sejas maneim shel shlosh hamitzvos kava Rashi esudram shel shlosh satvarim. And in consonance with the order of how these mitzvahs would be rolled out in a woman's life, Rashi brought them in that order. As soon as she becomes a bas chinuch, some kids can light candles at 2 years old. They're speaking, they're saying brachas, they understand. So takef b'hagia habas legil hachinuch himatchila l'shmars mitzvah l'ksaner. She starts to light candles. That's the miracle of ner dolok me'erev Shabbos erev Shabbos. La'achar zman kishehi gadla umatchila la'asik b'avodas habayis. Then after some time, she grows up and she begins to get involved in things that are done in the house. Then she also starts to make dough. That's the bracha mitzvah bisa. And after some additional time, the eis nisu'el, when she gets married, he mikayemes, it's mitzvahs nida, taras hamishpacha. She keeps the mitzvah of nida, taras hamishpacha, which is connected to the anan kashor al ha'ayah. Mikol ha'amor, from everything that was said above, move on, it's understood. Goydel haschus b'hishtadlus, how great is the merit in getting involved. Shekol bas Yisrael, that every Jewish girl, takef mishehigia lechinuch, as soon as she comes to an age where she can understand and she can be educated, that she should tadlik ner b'chol erev Shabbos kodesh erev Yom Tov, that she should light candles every erev Shabbos, every erev Yom Tov, v'al yedei hadlakas ner Shabbos, and through this, through the lighting of candles for Shabbos and Yom Tov, niske kenemar b'Yalkut Shemini, we will merit, pursuant to what it says in Yalkut Shemini, lekiyum, finally to seeing. Ani HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem says about himself, Ani Mare Lochem. We will finally be able to behold that Hashem promised that I will show you Neir Shel Tzion, the lights of Yerushalayim, of Tzion, B'Karav Mamish, very soon, B'Geula HaMitis V'Hashlema, with the complete and true Geula. And today is Chav Cheshvan, and if you look at the date of this Sikha, this was said on Chav Cheshvan, Shabbos Parshas Chayeh Sara, Tafshin Lamed Hey. So that's a sikha for today, and I invite everyone to unmute yourselves and share.
Practically speaking, what's the timeline here? Like, she came, and when did they get married? When did he see it? Did he need to wait? It says, the Rebbe says that the candle she did right away. When she gets older, we do the dough. When you get older, you get married, then you get the cloud. So when did this all happen?
I could be wrong, but it seems to me that what the Rebbe is saying in If Yud about how Rashi lists these in this precise order, which correlates with the order of when these mitzvahs would become relevant in a woman's life, he's not saying that's when Yitzchak married her. It does seem, however, that from what the Rebbe is explaining, and I'm not sure about this, but it does seem that Yitzchak married her 1 week later, because it would only have been 1 week later that he could see that the Ner Dolok Erev Shabbos, Erev Shabbos. Yeah, Vivi. Yeah, it was a watershed sikha 2 months after the beginning of Mrs. Nesh.
It's so apropos that Rivky, you're teaching us a sikha, the daughter of Mrs. Sternberg, whose whole life.
I'll tell you something funny. I ask Rabbi Yaris every week. I ask him to send it to me before the sikha is available online, because they have their own translation. So even if it's in Dvar Malchus, it's not, it's not the one that's going to be online. So I want to get it from him. And very often one is ready before the other, and I wait to get both to make a decision. He sent me this one was ready first. And then he said, I'm sorry, I only have one ready for you. And when I looked at it, I said, don't worry. This is the one I'm using. And he wrote back, I should have understood. So, it wasn't much of a toss-up this week. Listen, we've done sichas about inyanim that were far afield from us, So this one, it was a no-brainer. Esther, tell us something.
The amazing thing here is I think that the effect of a mitzvah, the effect of when a woman lights Shabbos candle, the effect that it has is very different than when a man lights Shabbos candle. And when a woman puts on tefillin, the effect will be very different than when a man puts on tefillin. So who does the mitzvah is a remarkable thing, the effect that it has. But what is, as women, what's so remarkable is the first time you see the Mikdash Ma'at, the Mishkan, in a small element. The first time you see reference to Mishkan, if you really look at it, is here by Sara. She really teaches us that later on, the lighting of the Shabbos candles, the Rebbe says, is for the menorah, right? And we'll see the Neor Shel Tzion. And the Isa and the Challah, the bracha in the Challah is also that you eat very little and it fills you up. Bracha in food and bracha in Challah, another element of it is it has a bracha. You don't have to eat a lot of it, and it already takes care of all your nourishment. So, and that it lasted from week to week is like lechem apanim. And the Taras Mishpacha is the Kodesh Kadashim. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the measurements of the Aron was qualified for a mikvah. The interesting thing is that you see here from Sara is you see the entire, it is after Yitzchak becomes a carbon. So you see the avodah b'chutz, you see the work outside of the Mishkan, right? He becomes a carbon, the masculine, right? And then you see the work on the inside from Sara. The hadlakas neros is the menorah, the dough is the lechem apanim, the mikvah is kodesh hakdashim, and then by keturah, you see about the masim tovim that the woman does is equal to the keturas on the inside on the golden mizbeach. It's all connected. You see the whole picture in a small picture, and it is with Sarah's passing that we get this whole picture. It's just an amazing. When we think about the feminine role, it's not a small thing. It is so not a small thing. It's quieter, but it's an amazing thing, and you see it right by Sara that whatever. I think even according to Chassidus, the inside role of the Mishkan was the feminine role, and the outside was the masculine. It's just an amazing thing what we create in having a home, and it's also these three mitzvahs that the Eibusha gives him Eis Ratzon, right? It is with these three mitzvahs that it is an auspicious time for a woman to ask, what other mitzvah do you have that? So, well, in mikvah, in lighting candles, and in making challah, it's an Eis Ratzon after you make the bracha. It's just, that I was saying, the effect is unbelievable, even if we do not see it, and how it affects.
I'd like to jump in and say something fast personal. Obviously many years ago, I wrote a letter to the Rebbe shortly after I was on Shlichus in Uruguay, married a few years. And one of the answers the Rebbe told me personally was not to forget to give tzedakah before lighting Ner Shabbos Kodesh Yantif. And it's something I try to tell everybody, and it also makes sense. If I was asking the Rebbe different questions and different needs or desires that I had, when you give tzedakah in an Eis Ratzon, there you got it. Anyway, I wanted to share that. Sometimes, we're just used to it. Probably everybody on this chat does it, but it's something to teach. It's something to, when we teach even mikveh, we teach whatever we do, and challah also. The importance of giving tzedakah before, because it's an Eis Ratzon. Thank you, Esther.
Well, thank you.
Thank you both. And for those of you who don't have the chat open, I just want to read that Vivi says, When I teach Kalas, I start with this Rashi, but first I ask what the predecessor of the Mishkan, Beis Hamikdash was. And even if they're educated women, they rarely guess it. The Ramban says exactly this in his preface to his parish on Chumash Shemais. He says that everything about the Mishkan and the Mikdash was predicated on what happened in the tents of the Imahis. It's a very, very powerful thing. Wishing everybody an illuminated week. We should be able to see the light, and Afchelecha Chav Cheshvan, and all the Hamshachis. And even though Joni is not here this week, she is still very interested in hearing from everybody about this gathering that she is planning, Mit Hashem, for Chav Beis Shvat. So if you haven't yet replied, please do. And everybody have a wonderful, wonderful week. Kol Tov.
Thank you so much.
Kol Tov.
Thank you.
How do you leave?